All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for coming. All right. And hopefully this don't buzz too much. It's probably come close to the speaker there. All right. Thank you guys for coming out tonight. For this Sheriff's Debate 2024 for our election on our primary June the 11th of 2024. I just want to say thank you. My name is B.J. Sutherland. I'm the Executive Committeeman with Pickens County Republican Party. Let's try that. Maybe that's a little better. There we go. Okay. Once again, my name is B.J. Sutherland. I'm with the Executive Committeeman with the Pickens County Republican Party. And I'm happy to be here helping with this debate amongst our sheriffs here this evening. And in my honest opinion, this is the most important election that we have in our county. Because these guys right here, who you see right here, one of these gentlemen is going to win the election. And they're going to be the front man for you and me. So this is a very, very serious thing here. And I just want to say that I'm very proud to say I've got to know each one of these guys a little bit more than I have before. Some of them might be a little longer, but and all of these guys are great guys. So this is going to be a tough decision. So I hope you get very well informed tonight during this debate. And so we're going to get started here. And I want to introduce, first, our pastor here, Dale Holloway. He's going to give our invocation and our pledge.
Join me in prayer, please. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for all of the blessings you have bestowed upon us. We thank you for each and every one of these candidates that has willingly stepped forward to serve in this position. I pray that your wonderful peace now will settle in each one of their midst. Lord, may your grace and your help be with them and help them to articulate each one of their positions in a very clear way, so each and every one will understand it and see who exactly they are. We ask this in your precious and holy name. Amen. Now join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated.
Okay. Next, I would like to introduce Mr. Joey Hudson. He is going to be our moderator tonight, and I'll let him take over from here and introduce our candidates and explain to you a few things about this evening.
Thank you, BJ. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm Joey Hudson. As mentioned, up until a few months ago, some of you may have listened to me on 94.5 The Answer until Salem sold the radio station. You can still hear the Mike Gallagher show online, and I'm often his guest host and on with Mike. And you can also listen to my podcast called Just the Truth, wherever you listen to podcasts. It's very important, as BJ said, this is one of the most, I think, as well, one of the most important decisions you'll make as far as your electing your sheriff. 46 states around the country elect their sheriffs. It's one of the most important local positions that you're going to have. A lot of people don't realize what sheriffs do. And looking at the group that you have to choose from here, Pickens County can't lose because you're going to have a good one. You've got some good guys running up here, and you've got a tough decision to make. They're your front line out there. I had the opportunity a few weeks ago to travel to Israel with the Mike Gallagher show. We were covering the war. And we met with some local, they don't call them sheriffs there, but they're local law enforcement. When Hamas came across the border on October the 7th, they were the first line of defense. They lost 58 local law enforcement officers in that region within the first 24 hours because they were there trying to defend and keep and protect their communities. Hopefully we never have to experience anything like that here in the homeland. but we want to make sure that our local sheriff's office, police office, that they're all ready and ready to do that. Our format for tonight is very simple. Each candidate will take 2 minutes to introduce themselves. Then we'll start with questions. And we will go down the list in order. Each person will get a question. They'll have 3 minutes to answer that question, and then each of the other candidates will have 2 minutes to respond as well. And then the person who got the question originally will have 1 minute to respond. So it's pretty simple. BJ is going to be our timekeeper. So, gentlemen, when he starts giving you that look, that means it's about time to wrap it up. And I think you're going to have you're going to have your timer here on too, right? So we'll hear something as well.
That's right.
So we're going to start with Mr. Blankenship. I'm just going to let you introduce yourself and take a couple minutes to do so. And we'll just share this mic.
And forgive me for sitting. I was told this was the format that we need to do for our media that are here. So it is no disrespect. My name is Tommy Blankenship. First and foremost, I am a child of the King. I'm a Christian man, a man of God. I am a father of 3 beautiful daughters. I have a gorgeous wife who's here with me tonight. We've been married for 18 years. I have worked for the Pickens County Sheriff's Office. It'll be 19 years next month. And it has been the second most exciting thing that I've ever been a part of. I love my job, I love my community, and I look forward to continuing to serve each and every one of you all in that capacity. Through the years that I've been there, I have served as a deputy sheriff, answering calls for service. I've been a proactive officer, looking for drugs and other criminal interdiction activities. I spent the majority of my career as a narcotics investigator, doing undercover operations. I came out of that as a sergeant of our community action team, which is our street-level drug interdiction unit, where I was their supervisor. And then most recently, I spent almost the past 5 years as the training officer for the Pickens County Sheriff's Office, where I oversee the training, the certification, the equipment for every single one of our 160 sworn positions. With those experiences, my center in Christ, I firmly believe that I will be the best man to serve you as sheriff. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm David Harrison. I'm also running for sheriff of Pickens County. A little bit about myself and why I'm here. I am born and raised in Easley. Graduated high school from Easley High School in 1996. I started my law enforcement career with South Carolina Highway Patrol. My first duty station was Oconee County, which is very similar to Pickens County. Can y'all hear me? Do I need to scream? How about that? Anyway, I started my career with the Highway Patrol almost 25 years ago. I'm coming up on my 25th year in law enforcement. Enjoyed being a state trooper. We work traffic, work a lot of regs, et cetera, et cetera. Oconee County is a very rural county like Pickens County. And almost by chance, I started finding a lot of drugs because we have a lot of drugs. And I ended up going to the criminal interdiction unit where I spent the remainder of my career, my 17-year career with Highway Patrol. 5 of that being a K-9 handler. Before I was recruited to Greenville County to start up their interdiction unit that they still have going today, working Interstate 85. If any of you have traveled 85 through Greenville, you've probably seen those guys sitting on the side of the interstate working. In 2020, I lost one of my deputies, one of my good friends in the line of duty, and I requested to come off the interstate after almost 21 years. So now I work in investigations with the Greenville County Sheriff's Office, where my job is to handle anything from a shoplifting all the way up to an overdose death investigation. And I can tell you we have a lot of those in Greenville. We also have a lot of those over here. I'm now seeing the other side of the drug epidemic, because now I'm having to not arrest people and try to put them in prison, but I'm having to deal with families and the outcome of the death.
That's your time. Thank you, sir.
Good evening. The first thing I want to do is I want to thank all the dispatchers, and not only this county, but every county across this state. This is Dispatcher Week, and we need to all think about those folks because they keep you safe and they keep the law enforcement guys safe. So if you see a dispatcher, please let them know how much you appreciate what they do day in and day out. Their job is almost as tough as what the head can do out there answering calls for service, to be honest with you. I raised my family here in Pickens County over the last 35 years. I've always worked across the river. I go down 123 and go across the river and work Greenville County every day of my career for 29 years. I started out in 1992 as a reserve deputy. I volunteered my time, went full-time in 1993, went through some promotions. I'll jump to sergeant. When I got promoted to sergeant, I was in uniform patrol for a few years, and then they asked me to move over to school enforcement. When I moved over to school enforcement, I learned a lot about the schools and school safety. One of the things we did was risk assessments in the schools. We would do risk assessments and find out what the problem areas were in the schools, and then we would add layers of protection to keep our children safe as they were in the school trying to learn in a safe learning environment, which I think is very important in this position that we're talking about here as the sheriff. From there, I was promoted to lieutenant on the road, and from there, I got promoted to captain. When I got promoted to captain, I was appointed the emergency management director over Greenville County. I'm sure most of you folks are familiar with what emergency management director does, but I don't know how in-depth that job really is. It's an extremely important job where the emergency management director is responsible for every person in that county for the duration of their time as the director. I was the director for 5 years in Greenville County, and
Time's up.
don't have any more time.
I'd like to begin by thanking each and every one of you for being here this evening. As has already been mentioned, this is easily the most important race in Pickens County. It's the most important race because this office, the office of sheriff, is rooted in constitutional traditions of this country. And the role of sheriff outside of just basic law enforcement duties includes protecting your constitutional rights and freedoms. So it's important who our sheriff is. And I'm glad that all of you take this as seriously as we do. So thank you for being here. With that said, my name is Chuck James. I presently serve as the Chief Deputy or number 2 in command of the Pickens County Sheriff's Office. I have a bachelor's degree in political science, a bachelor's degree in history, a master's degree in criminal justice, and I've been in law enforcement now for 19 years. Fortunately for me, the last 17 of those have been in dedicated service to you, the citizens of Pickens County, as a deputy with the Pickens County Sheriff's Office. My story is one from the ground up. I didn't begin as the chief deputy. I began as a deputy working this zone right here where we sit right now. And for the last 17 years, I have steadily worked my way through the ranks from deputy to master deputy to detective, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and today I proudly serve as your chief deputy, where I lead a department of 192 devoted employees, manage an $18 million budget, and develop and implement crime suppression tactics for the Pickens County Sheriff's Office. I'm running for sheriff because I think we need a sheriff that's more than just tough talk. I think we need a sheriff that has executive management experience, budget experience, and a strategic vision for the future. Thank you.
If that thing cuts back on, I'm just holding this like an ice cream cone right to my face. A little bit about myself. I want to start with my family. I have a beautiful wife. We've been married for 23 years. She's sweet and kind. I have 3 kids. I have Toby. He's in Liberty High School. Natalie, she's in Liberty Middle School. And Samuel, he's in Liberty Little School. And I also graduated from Easley High School in 1995. Out of high school, I joined the Marine Corps. And when I got done with that, I worked in factories for a little while. And then in 2006, I began to work for the Liberty Police Department. And that's kind of where I started my law enforcement journey. After being at Liberty for a while, I felt God calling me to be a pastor, and I honored that. And I moved away, moved my whole family to Kentucky, where I was a pastor for a number of years. And honestly, when I left, I never thought that I would be doing this again. But as God would have it, I finished what I felt like God called me to do, and I came back and I began to work for the Pickens County Sheriff's Office. And I currently, right now, work for the Oconee County Sheriff's Office as a sergeant in the Sex Offender Registry. When I wanted to be a pastor and I felt a desire of God to be a pastor, one of the things that hurt my feelings is no one ever asked me to be a pastor and no one asked me to preach. And so I went to my pastor and I said, I just have this passion to do this, but no one's asking me. And he said, Michael, sometimes in order for people to take you seriously, you have to show them you're serious. He said, I'd recommend you go to Bible college and show people I'm serious about this. And I did that, and it worked. I went, and then people started to ask me to preach and to be their pastor. And so when I felt led to start this journey of running for sheriff and to be the sheriff, I want people to take me seriously. So I started to take and do things that would show people that I'm serious. And I earned my master's degree, a master's of science in criminal justice policy and leadership, because I want to do a great job for you guys.
Thank you, sir. We'll start with our first question. And by the way, let me explain that the questions were submitted, and I just opened them myself a moment ago. And if we happen to get through these questions, depending on our time, then I have some additional questions that I have come up with as well. So we're going to start with you, Mr. Blankenship. You will have 3 minutes to answer this. It's on election integrity. In relation to elections involving voting machines, in light of evidence that foreign nationals have accessed electronic voting machines in Michigan and other states, as sheriff, how would you respond to reports of voting machines and systems being altered, manipulated, or otherwise being interfered with by the use of thumb flash drives or external devices that can be connected to voting machines before, during, or after elections? And you have 3 minutes.
Yes, so to begin with, in the event that you guys are at the poll and you recognize something that is suspicious. I've actually had a citizen reach out to me saying that the last election, that when they went to the machine, the individual they were trying to select would automatically switch before they hit submit. And they called it just in time to make several efforts. My advice to you, if you see something like that or something similar, is to stop in that moment and contact the sheriff's office. Now, I know there are rules whenever you're in a polling place about utilization of a cell phone, but at this point in time, there needs to be an active investigation taking place. And there is going to be evidence of a crime there in our face, and we need the sheriff's office to respond immediately so that we can get proof of that evidence, whether it's photographs at that point in time or seizure of that machine. So that's something that I offer as the sheriff. I will wholeheartedly, without a doubt, in the event that a citizen believes that they have true and factual knowledge or evidence of tampering with our elections and those election machines, then our men and women will be on scene collecting that evidence and stopping that election. At that point in time, we would obviously have to move to a paper ballot within our county. Outside of that, if we come upon the evidence post-election, it'll be the exact same process where we will have that investigation take place, and it will start with the sheriff's office. Obviously, we will have to involve other entities to help us break down all of the information and go through all of the evidence, but we will not stand for any type of election fraud in Pickens County. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Harrison, 2 minutes.
So, to sort of mirror what Tommy said, I know right now in this country, especially in this state and in our county, and I'm going to reference Julie Baker on this, there's a lot of folks now who have questions about our elections and the security and the accuracy. As sheriff, if I were to receive word that there was some sort of tampering with the machines, and there's probable cause to support that, then we would take care of business. If that means seizing the machines and the equipment, so be it. From what I understand, though, right now, the only folks that have access to that program with these machines are the people that manufactured it. But the problem with electronics is, we all know now, they can be manipulated. Your cell phone, your computer, you can get things via email, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not going to talk too far out of my expertise with electronics, because if I have a problem with my TV, the first person I call is my brother. But if there's enough probable cause, to get back to the question of tampering, then as a sheriff, you have to step in and do what's right. And if that means seizing the machines, getting a search warrant for that stuff, so be it. And that's how I would handle that. Thank you.
Yeah, the investigation would start with the sheriff's office. And I can tell you real quick, if it was the sheriff's election like we're talking about tonight, we would have to call in another agency to come in and do the investigation for us. We could initiate that investigation, but it would be turned over to SLED. Our state law enforcement division would have to come in and actually take that over if it was in reference to the sheriff's election, which is what we're here for tonight. Other than that, we would investigate it to the fullest extent of our knowledge, because they're right. The machines, there's a lot of things we don't know about how those machines operate and function. So we would definitely have to call in some other people in to assist us with that, to figure out if there was tampering, if there was anything going on that shouldn't be going on during that voting cycle. So definitely be fully investigated. And I do like the paper ballot. I remember voting on a paper ballot, and I think that's the way. And I also think that if we could go back to paper ballot, why can't I take a picture of my ballot whenever I fill that thing out? You know, they won't even allow you to take a picture of who you actually voted for. But if they would allow us to use our phones, which everybody has, you can take a picture of your ballot and know and have proof of who you voted for. So whenever it came up, it would definitely help law enforcement do their investigation. It'd be simple to get everybody's phone in and we can take a look at who you actually voted for and compare it to what that machine says. And that's when the problem would come in, if we could find the discrepancies between your photograph of your ballot ticket versus what that machine says. And we could make a real solid determination, and we could file charges appropriately and get an eviction on that. Thank you.
So this is an interesting question because it calls into the very foundation of our democracy, which is election integrity. Because if our votes aren't being counted, then our democracy is a farce. So this is something that's near and dear to me. But it's interesting too because we as a society use technology out of convenience, but we have almost evolved to a point where now it's a liability. And so with respect to my response as sheriff, I stand with Damon on this. First and foremost, I think we need to return to paper ballots. I think that's the only way for us to ensure that we're doing this safely. I don't think when the basis of our democracy is at stake, this is where it's a time for us to lean on convenience. But yes, I would investigate it fully. The sheriff's office would be called in. We would collect the voting machines in question, and we would work hand in hand not only with the Board of Elections, we would work hand in hand with the state to find out whoever the culprit was and hold them accountable to the fullest extent of the law.
So this whole thing started, if you're old enough, and most of you guys I can tell are, in the George Bush. I'm sorry.
I think you just called us all old.
So I'll say this. Let me say it this way. You're as old as I am. It started with the George Bush hanging Chad. They created a problem, and then they gave us a solution. Created a problem, gave us a solution. And the solution obviously became a problem, an actual problem. I agree with these guys, and Damon said it perfectly. If it involves this election, it would go out of our hands so quick. The only thing we could do as the sheriff's office would be to immediately come in, stop it, seize it, make it stick and stuck, and then SLED comes in and does their job, and they actually would have a lot more know-how to get to the bottom of that. But I agree, these guys, that's perfect.
Thank you. Our next question involves federal overreach. Mr. Harrison, we'll start with you. You'll have 3 minutes. The question is, what would be your response to any unconstitutional federal mandates involving gun confiscation, vaccine, or mask mandates?
Okay, so I've answered this question more than any other question in the past 4.5 years since I've been campaigning. I'm a staunch Second Amendment and Constitution supporter. The oath that I took day one of going into law enforcement was to protect not only the federal Constitution, but the state Constitution that we have. And the state pretty much mirrors the federal. And this is my opinion, and this is how I interpret the Second Amendment, any change, modification, requirement actually goes against what is printed on paper when it comes to the Second Amendment. That includes permits, safety training, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I'm the type of person, I grew up with guns. I shot my first gun. It was a Dane & Wesson 44 revolver when I was like 8 years old. I thought it was going to knock my head off when it kicked, but that's when I started shooting guns. I have never had a gun go off without me putting my finger on the trigger and pointing it at whatever I'm shooting, whether that's been in the line of duty, training, or for fun. So any mandates that come out from the federal government on the Second Amendment, I'm going to be hard-pressed to go out and enforce those. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be more likely the candidate to show up, ask the federal government, what are you here for? Where is your paperwork? Okay, you can exit the county now. We don't need you here. And that's my response.
2 minutes.
The Second Amendment, I'm a cop, so the Second Amendment is dear to my heart. And I can promise you that I don't care what federal agency comes into Pickens County. Federal agents didn't elect your sheriff. You elect your sheriff. You are the boss of your sheriff. If he does right, you'll keep him in office. If he doesn't, you're going to kick him out and put somebody else in that seat. But there's no federal agency going to come in Pickens County and take any of our guns away. I mean, Governor McMaster just signed the constitutional carry in this state, and I was very happy that he did that. Because guess what? The bad guy, he doesn't have a permit. He doesn't have a CWP. He doesn't even have that gun legally. So why shouldn't us, the hard-working, honest people of our county and our state, why can't we carry a gun? Why can't we legally carry a gun? Well, now we can because he signed that law, and now it's law that you can carry that gun. I will tell you, if you carry your gun and you see a deputy on the side of the road fighting for his life, I just ask that you train with that gun and know what you're shooting at. Because if you do have to pull over to help a deputy sheriff out or a police officer, it'd be nice if when you shot that gun, you hit the suspect, not the deputy. Especially if it's me on the side of the road fighting. Because I've been there many times before in my career. But no, it's a serious thing. And then on the quarantine, I want to talk about that for a second because we're talking about this SAR, the 915 bill. I know everybody knows about that bill. And I just looked at it today again. They're finally making some changes on that. I had a conversation with Rex Rice last week about it and told him how disappointed I was that a healthcare professional could tell a sheriff when to go out and set up quarantine. But anyhow, that bill, they're making changes now, and the must wording in that bill is being removed as we speak, and it's going to make assist.
2 minutes.
So So I said this in the last debate, so I'll say it again. First and foremost, I'm a staunch supporter of the Second Amendment, and I do not think that the framers of the Constitution made a mistake in 1791 when they stated a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I don't think that was a mistake. And as I stated in my opening statement, I'm here to be a sheriff who supports your constitutional rights against the federal government and against the state government. Whether that be them coming to engage in an unlawful gun grab, of which I will not engage in and I will not assist them in. Or if it comes down to, as Damon mentioned, the healthcare czar, which I too have fundamental problems with, when we have an unelected bureaucrat in Columbia who has authority over elected sheriffs. I think that is a fundamental problem. I think that's dangerous, and I think that violates our constitutional rights. So let me be clear. I will not assist the federal government in any unlawful gun grab or any effort to put forth a federal medical mandate on you, or even a state mandate.
Thank you.
When it comes to guns, it's all about safety. Most of you guys live a long way away. You live out in the county. And it's going to take a little while to get to you. And so you're going to have to solve your problem yourself for a little while. And so we're going to let you keep your guns. You've got to be able to protect yourself. And when it comes to the health czar and other stuff like that, I talked to my wife when this started. And I told her, I said, we're getting into a time in life where we're going to probably, if I'm the sheriff, have to set the precedent on something to where we're going to be all over the news. And we're not going to make you wear a mask. We're not going to do all of those health mandates. You take care of yourself. You're grown. Like I pointed out last time, some of y'all are old. Like, you know how to take care of yourself. That's exactly what my dad said. I know how to take care of myself. You know how to take care of yourself. And if I have to set precedent as sheriff, I will set precedent. They'll say, we told you to do that. And I'll say, and we're not doing that. If they're needing the police to make it happen, the police aren't going to make it happen. And we're going to set precedent. But I just say, if I do end up on the news setting precedent, like we stand for something or I stand for something, if you voted for me because you thought I would do that, I need you to stand behind me when that happens and not just hang me out to dry.
Thank you. Mr. Blankenship, 2 minutes on this question.
So there's a lot that's been said. The simple way to say it is no way, no how. There is no way that I would ever allow anyone to come into Pickens County and infringe on your God-given rights that are merely protected by the Constitution. Those are not rights that are granted to you by the government. Those are rights that are granted to you by God. And they're protected by that Constitution. And that's what my oath is to protect your constitutional rights. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. I know it sounds somewhat self-serving, but I protect your rights because those are my rights as well. And the moment that a sheriff starts down that slippery slope of removing your rights, his are next to follow. Not only would I stand between you and the federal government, but we would file litigation against the federal government or the state government at any point in time they decide to infringe on your God-given rights, on your Bill of Rights, on your constitutional rights. And it's very easy to get up here and say, I'll do these things and I'll do these things. But I speak from a position of I have done this thing. I have stood before one of the federal agents who was trying to illegally search a home in violation of a Fourth Amendment right and said, no, sir, you will not. And not only have I done that, but I've taken steps to secure like-minded men by joining the Conservative Sheriffs and Police Officers Association of America. They are an amazing outreach. There is so much information, and it's centered around Sheriff Mack, who successfully sued the federal government when Bill Clinton was president, utilizing the 10th Amendment and the sovereignty of the states. So that's my stance, not just on your Second Amendment, not just on your Fourth Amendment, but on every right that's protected by the Bill of Rights.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison? Mr. You said you've been out 1 minute. Do you have anything else you'd like to add to this? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next question.
No, we move on.
Okay. All right, Mr. Hubbard, we'll start with you on this next question involving illegal immigration. In some counties, the sheriff's office knows when and where illegal immigrants are coming in. Are you willing to stop these groups from coming in to our county and make them leave? And additionally, how would you address squatters in Pickens County?
All right, that's two good ones. If y'all are familiar with the bill 1149, 1149 is a bill that is just introduced, I believe, the 12th of March this year, and it's in reference to immigration. The bill is a good bill. The only thing I don't understand is there's 3 sheriffs that have signed on to that bill so far. You've got York, Lexington, and Horry County. 3 sheriffs out of 46 have signed it so far. I want to be 4th sheriff. If I'm elected, I will sign this bill because it gives you 2 options that you can look at. It's 287G. Y'all look the bill up when you get home tonight. It's 1149. 287G is the 2 ways. There's 2 ways that a sheriff can sign the agreement to have his deputies, gives them the authority to work directly with ICE agents. That's the custom and immigration guys. If you arrest an illegal immigrant in your county, you can have those agents come to your agency. Your guys are already certified, they've already been through the training, and they have the know-how to assist the ICE agents on properly removing that person from our country. They actually will assist federal agents get these non-citizens out of our county. Not only out of the county, they'll help get them deported out of the state, but our goal is to get them out of our county. It's one thing when you're victimized by a U.S. citizen, but it's a whole different ballgame when you're victimized by an illegal immigrant who shouldn't be here in the first place. And that's the biggest problem I got with it. So I would sign that agreement the day 1 in office, and I would work directly with ICE, and I would have these guys move. Now, if it's a crime of murder or rape or something like that, they're going to stay here, and I would fight the federal government on this. I would fight them and make that person stay here. I don't care if they're illegal or not. They're going to pay for that crime they committed in our county. They're going to pay for that crime. Squatters, I don't know if you folks know it or not, but in South Carolina, squatters have rights. All right, go online and look at it. They have squatter rights. The way to overcome that is to check your abandoned property. If there's property out there you're selling, you've got to keep a check on it a lot. But the best way, I've read that whole law. I don't like it at all. They call it adverse possession. That's what the legal guys call it, all you attorneys. It's squatters, bottom line. But if you put up no trespassing notice on your property, we can take them off your property immediately. So I'd recommend to you, if you've got any abandoned property in Pickens County, you need to post it immediately because that protects you and your property. If we come out as law enforcement and you have your signs, they're on your property, they can be arrested and removed off your property. But I do warn you, you've got to be very careful with it about them taking over your property.
Thank you.
have to register just in case they take that sign down.
We'll move on. Mr. James, you have 2 minutes.
Damon stole my thunder on 287G. Appreciate that. I don't know how you have a sovereign country if you have unfettered migration. Quite frankly, the federal government has failed us. And this is becoming an increasingly problematic problem for us in Pickens County in South Carolina. It's not something that historically we had to deal with. It was something that border states had to deal with. But thanks to a federal government that does not believe in securing our southern border, we have illicit narcotics and undocumented citizens, illegal citizens, crossing the border and bringing cartel drugs, prostitution, child trafficking, all the problems that we've never dealt with here. So we have to be real about it. So my approach with respect to illegal immigrants is I would sign 287G. Somebody emailed me about that recently, and I believe that's a good bill. I think we would be smart to sign it. I think it would give us the authority necessary. But I also think the state of South Carolina is going to actually have to step up at some point. And we need to probably look at what Florida's done in the past and start shipping people out of our state. If they come here, we need to start busing them back to the southern border, because this should not be our problem. With respect to squatters, yes, unfortunately, squatters have rights. I don't know why, but they do. I think if we, as Damon said, if we ended up putting trespass notices, we can actually take action. But I don't believe that the squatter should have the rights to come on your property, establish residency within 2 weeks, and then be able to take over your property. I have a serious problem with that, and I will do everything in my power to work with the state legislature to fight that.
Thank you. Mr. Tigger, 2 minutes, please.
So, with speaking about immigration, these guys said it. That's the best that could be said. That's a good job. When it comes to squatters and squatters' rights, if they go in your home, they've broken into your home. They've committed a violation of the law. They're going to jail. So if you come home and there's somebody sleeping in your bed, then we're going to come get them. Like, you call us, we're going to come arrest them. They have broken into your home. They don't live there. If they go onto your property, that's where it gets a little hairy. If they're off in your woods, living in a tent, and like they said, you need to put up no trespassing signs. And like I was explaining this to somebody at work today, you have to go confront people and say, I don't want you here. You can't just know there's a problem on your back 40 and we'll get to it eventually. That needs to happen. Like, you just need to go ahead and start that process. But if they're in your home, they have broken in your home and they're going to jail.
Thank you.
So wow, 2 minutes to talk about illegal immigration and squatters. I can personally tell you that those are two things that, as a citizen of Pickens County, would definitely concern me. So with illegal immigration, obviously we do not have in place right now any kind of stringent laws that would allow us just to go out here and arrest someone who's merely here illegally. However, we do have very good human trafficking laws. And within those human trafficking laws, there are subsets which allow you to charge a person with human trafficking if they are assisting in moving someone around in this country illegally. So someone who is transporting an illegal immigrant throughout this state is actually guilty of the crime of human trafficking. There's been some cases made out of Florida where there is a specific individual that has traveled this entire country on a voucher from Homeland Security that has set up prostitution rings in New York and Florida. And this has now come to light. There's a sheriff that has made over 60 arrests, two including some military personnel. But these were illegal immigrants utilizing our current administration's freedoms to break local and state laws and human trafficking laws. So there are ways to deal with it. Outside of that, we're going to have to lean on those ICE agents to come in and take possession of those individuals once they've committed a crime. So just merely being here and not being a legal citizen is not something that we're going to be able to just go out and identify and arrest off of itself. With the squatters laws, I've been reading about this. I'm a property owner in the northern part of Pickens County. I have actually had individuals decide to set up camp at the back corner of my property and had to run them off. So,
sorry, time's up. Mr. Harrison, 2 minutes.
Okay, so now we've referenced the federal government twice. I think we're about 30 minutes into this program. The reality is, and most folks do not realize, but the sheriff has the absolute authority to remove anyone who is here illegally. We do not have to get ICE involved, because guess what? If they do, if ICE decides that they're going to come out and pick them up, which chances are not going to happen, speak from experience, they have to have a violent felony or multiple felonies, like with drugs, things like that, for the federal government to even blink an eye. Then they have to go to a deportation hearing in front of a federal judge who was most likely appointed by someone in Washington. I can tell you now, with the current administration we have in Washington, D.C., they're not going to be deporting many people at all. It makes no sense if the gates are wide open and now the Border Patrol agents are instructed to give hand signals and hand out water and medical for these folks that are flowing over. So the sheriff of a county, again, it's hard to inform folks how important and powerful that role is in this country, does not need the federal government. And if you get enough sheriffs and you get enough of the citizens on board, guess what? You can move those people. I'm not saying go out here and just grab them and put them on a bus, but if you're locking them up for driving without a driver's license, you stop them because they ran a stop sign or they shoplifted or whatever the case may be, and you're rounding these folks up who are not supposed to be in my country and in your country, guess what? We can move them. We can get them out of Pickens County. And I don't need Uncle Sam to help me do that. And so that's my part.
Thank you. Mr. Harper, you had 1 minute in response, and I cut you off earlier because your time expired. If you'd like to take an additional minute on this.
When the sheriff signs this disagreement, this bill, it's 1149 that we've been talking about, you can remove these guys out of your county, but removing them out of the United States is a different story. You have to work with the ICE agents in order to get that accomplished. They're going to do it the proper way, and they're going to remove them out of the country legally. As a sheriff, I can take them to the county line and drop them off, just like they do all the time with people who commit crime in other counties. You hear about other deputies, law enforcement dropping people off in other counties when they do things. It's the same thing. If you do it legally and you follow the guidelines of this bill, read the bill. I promise you, read that bill. It's a good bill and it's a solid bill, and it's going to pass. The squatters thing, make sure, I told you about no trespassing signs. The other thing is take a picture of those signs, because they're going to rip those signs off the trees, house, wherever you post them. They're going to rip those signs down. But if you have it on your phone, that shows us that you have to put that posting up.
Mr. James, we'll start with you on this next question. You'll have 3 minutes. How do you serve the community outside of your role in law enforcement, leading by example with your role in law enforcement and within the community? And what is the most important trait of a leader and why?
So, quite frankly, I don't have a lot of time outside of my role in law enforcement. As Chief Deputy of the Pickens County Sheriff's Office, and having been a lead detective since 2011, I have devoted my life to Pickens County. I have spent every day on call for the last 11 years, 24/7, 365. I have some nephews and I help with their football games, but outside of that, admittedly, I don't have a lot of hobbies. With respect to how I lead in the Pickens County Sheriff's Office, I lead by example. Like I said, I lead an agency of 192 devoted employees. And the way I lead is I want them to see what I do and follow that example. And I try and do that every single day with my work ethic, with my morals, with my decision making. And I consider myself, there's a variety of leadership styles. I consider myself a transformational leader. Somebody that tries to inspire them to do better or think outside the box. So that's really how I've led since I've been in law enforcement, and even how I lead in my personal life.
Thank you. 2 minutes.
Yes, sir. So years ago, me and my wife used to run a church bus, and we would pick up kids in Easley from all over Easley. We did that for 14 years. And we tried, our goal was to make a difference, to change their lives. I'm an adult now, the kids are adults now, and they are still doing what their parents did, and we thought we changed their lives, we didn't. My wife and I, we talked about this years ago, and I believe this wholeheartedly. In order to change a child's life, you have to sometimes change where they go home. and that's when we started working in foster care. And the difference we made was uniquely different than picking them up for an hour on Sunday when they get to come home with you and they're safe. That's how I lead in the community. It's somehow I end up around kids a lot. I've been in schools as their resource officer, but I speak in FCA when they ask, and so you change the kids, you change your future. And as a leader, I think what I bring to the table uniquely different is if you do a good job, it's your job. You do not have to like me to be promoted or to be hired. I don't have to like you to be promoted, for you to be promoted and hired. You do a good job, you'll work there, you'll be promoted, and I'll help you become the sheriff if that's your goal. And so that's something that's unique about me, is I'm not, as a leader, I'm not trying to bring in people that I like or that are like me. I'm trying to bring in the best, especially as sheriff, because it's about safety. And it may be guys that we don't do anything outside of work because we don't want to. But you do a great job, you'll have that job.
Thank you. Mr. Blankenship, 2 minutes, please.
So outside of my role in law enforcement, how have I served my community? I've been a youth pastor since 2006. I have poured into the youth of this community. I've coached sports. I've spoken at FCA. I have spoken at numerous events where schools have asked me to come do drug talks. I have spoken at events where I've spoken about leadership and about discipline. I do drug talks, fentanyl talks. I have been a part of more charitable events than I could even think to count. So outside of my role in law enforcement, I make time to serve my community. Anyone that says they don't have time, that's an excuse. And excuses are lies that we tell ourselves to rationalize bad behavior. On a flip note, how do I lead by example? Or how do I lead now? I lead by example in everything that I do. I work hard to study. I read on a regular basis to make sure that my mind is sharp. I train physically every single day so that I can be an asset in any moment that one of our officers or one of you all need me. And the last part of that question that nobody's answered is, what's the most important trait that a leader can have? It's humility. Because that's how you lead. You lead with a humble heart. Because leaders are meant to be servants. They don't lead with an iron fist. They're not iron rulers. They are servants to the very people they lead. And that's how you can be a successful leader. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Joey, can you reread the question? I want to make sure that I understand this. Sure, completely.
How do you serve the community outside of your role in law enforcement, leading by example within your role in law enforcement and within the community? And what is the most important trait of a leader and why?
Okay. As far as how do I serve the community outside of law enforcement, currently I am out and about every day on my days off, meeting with folks, going to events, helping folks out with things. Matter of fact, I went to Lowe's the other day for some materials to replace some signs that the wind damaged, and a lady needed help loading mulch bags in her car. So me and my bad back went and helped her load up her car with the mulch. But no, I think outside, as far as community service and things like that, setting an example for others. Now, we work in law enforcement. We're held to a higher standard. We know that. People know who we are. They see us every day, and they know what we do. Therefore, I do not partake in hanging out in bars. Personally, I don't drink. I grew up around it, and I just don't do that. I try to live a very clean lifestyle. I've got a Mustang that I would love to drive fast, but I don't even drive fast in that car because folks know what I drive. So I try to live a clean life inside and outside of law enforcement. Going to leadership, now I want to first say that I don't want anyone in this room to get it mixed up that because an officer or a firefighter or someone in the military has rank, it means that they are a leader. A leader, it's individual. It's per person, okay? Sometimes leadership is learned, but sometimes folks just have it. And we've all worked with folks that meet both criteria. Some folks walk into a room and command presence. Some folks have to learn how to do that. But don't think that because someone has rank on their collar that they're more successful than the guy still working at the bottom. And that the guy at the bottom is not a leader. Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Hubbard, 2 minutes.
Do I have
Oh. Yeah, when we get back to you. Yes. Yes. We have one more. Yes.
The leader part, I'm gonna get to talk about me being emergency management director now, because it means a lot to me, what I learned during that time frame. I was the director for 5 years. And you're a leader in a time of crisis. When crisis hits the fan, and you're the one who's responsible for making all the calls to make sure that people are safe, that is being a leader. Other than that, you're just in charge of folks under your command. When I was at Greenville County Sheriff's Office, my last duty I had when I left there, I was major over operations. I had 250 employees under my command. Civilian and sworn, I have all uniform patrol, 200 deputies. I had about 50 dispatchers. I was responsible for them. So there's a lot to it other than just being the head guy. I like to lead by example. All the way up through my career, through all of my promotions, I answered calls for service. I never stopped doing it. Now, when I was a major, I was called in by the sheriff, who told me that I was in a little bit different role. I had a lot of people I was responsible for, and he told me that I needed to quit answering so many calls for service with the deputies. Okay, that's the only reason that I slowed down. But leading by example and doing the hands-on things with your guys out in the field, that's a leader. That's the proper way to lead your guys. Now, being out there all the time, I understood what Hobart was telling me when he told me that back in the day. He slowed me down a little bit, and I understood that. And I know if I get elected to be sheriff that it's going to be the same thing. I'm going to have to lead the agency. I can't go out there and answer calls for service like I used to be. The community service thing, I've done anything from youth sports, everything. I did basketball, baseball, all of that. The church and Meals on Wheels. I did a lot in the community back in the day.
Mr. James, now you have your 1 minute.
Thank you. I apologize for that. No, to David's point, I agree. There's leaders in all ranks, regardless of whether you have brass on your collar or not. But I do think leading a sheriff's office, when you're talking about a multifaceted organization that includes a detention center, law enforcement, civil process, the 911 communications center, courthouse security, a sheriff's office, that is a large organization, and the only type of leadership that you're going to get there is leadership that's forged through experience. Leadership that is forged through trial and error. Leadership can't be learned in books, and leadership can't be, you can't just make it on a whim. You can't decide one day you're a leader and be elected leader. Leadership is what you become as a result of the process of going through difficult times. But the true test of a leader is making a difficult decision, a difficult, unpopular decision. And I can tell you, throughout my career, I've done that countless times.
Thank you, sir. Next question, Mr. Fittner. You'll have 3 minutes to begin. What training would you conduct to ensure that active shooter incidents are handled proficiently and swiftly in order to save as many lives as possible? And I want to add one thing to that as well. This week we heard arguments in front of a Nashville judge on whether or not Audrey Hale, who entered Covenant Christian School last spring and killed 3 young children and 3 adults, the argument was that her manifesto should be released. What are your positions on releasing that type of document as well?
Okay. So when it comes to active shooter, I think the biggest, most important thing is that every agency in Pickens County receives the same training. One of the issues we have in Pickens County is in the schools. Some schools are Pickens County officers. Some schools are Easley officers. Some schools are Liberty officers. Pickens County's coming to all of those, but if we don't train together, then we have an idea of what we're going to do. They have an idea of what they're going to do. And as sheriff, I would be willing to work with all of those agencies. I think, okay, you can keep your Easley officers as SROs. I won't touch that, but they have to train with us. Liberty has to train with us. The Pickens has to train with us. So we are all responding the same. That's how we're going to be proficient, is when we are all on the same page. We will all look stupid if we don't start doing that. If we go to a call at Easley High School and we are trained to run in and they're trained to wait just a minute and wait for 4 people, we need to make sure it's the same. And currently, that's not what's happening. And so as sheriff, I'll go to those guys, and if they have some qualification for them to come and train with us, I'll meet whatever qualification that is. If we got to pay them to be here, they're going to be here. We're all going to get the same training. When it comes to releasing a manifesto, just to be honest, that thing could say some pretty crazy stuff. It could have some really horrible things in it. And sometimes as law enforcement officers, we see some pretty horrible things, and we just choose not to tell our family because it's just too much. These suicides that I've gone to, and they'll have notes, and you'll read the note, and the note may say something horrible about somebody, and so you're thinking, gosh, they killed themselves and they hate me. It's not, in my personal opinion, this is just my opinion, it is not always the best thing to tell everybody everything that happened. At some point, you've got to trust. Like, I don't tell my wife, she just trusts that I had a hard day. I had a hard day, and let it be. And so I think it's the same thing. I know that everybody wants to know everything, and we could do that, but boy, it would be horrible if you knew everything.
Thank you.
Especially that we
2 minutes, Mr. Blankenship.
So being the training coordinator for the Sheriff's Office, I can already let you know that we're actively training on this stuff on a regular basis. Our SROs are currently probably some of the highest trained individuals we have in our agency because of the amount of training that they're getting for response to an active aggressive individual. We've also partnered with our EMS units. We started several years ago. I got a good relationship with Dietrich Easter, and we have started doing what we call RTF training, which is Rescue Task Force. What Rescue Task Force is forcing the saving of lives right behind the stopping of the killing. So when an officer is responding, or whoever it is, to an active shooter event, their job is to go find that armed intruder and stop that event. And you can't save lives until you stop the killing. Well, what this training is now doing is pushing that line where we have armed individuals as well as EMS staff that are being trained to go into the hot zone and start saving lives immediately. So we're already making very proactive steps towards that. To kind of echo off of what Mike said, in a perfect world, every single one of these officers would train together. They would all work for the same agency and follow the same chain of command. That's something that hopefully as we move forward, that the leaders of each and every law enforcement agency can come to an agreement on. And lastly, as far as that manifesto, it needs to be a controlled release. I don't think that's something we want to disseminate out on the public necessarily, but that information needs to be in the hands of law enforcement. That information needs to be in the hands of medical personnel, mental health evaluators, so that we can see what kind of thoughts and processes are going through this person's mind, so that we can try to stop that, and then maybe at some point in time have a redacted version that takes out all of that nasty messiness, but still delivers that message so that if a family member knows of someone who may be having these ideologies, they can stop it, because it's proven that someone is 16 times more likely to commit that violent event if they go completely unchecked. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to cover the manifesto first, and my thoughts on public information when it comes to the government is, if it does not affect the case, there's no need to redact anything regardless of how bad or terrible it is. If an adult wants to read this garbage, then that is up to them. I agree with Tommy. We need to analyze that thing. Professionals need to analyze things like that so that maybe in the future law enforcement can prevent future shootings. How do you stop a school shooter, though? Well-placed round, center mass to the chest. Tommy hit on it, and I think Tommy actually does a fine job of training based on the small amount of money that he has allowed. But years ago, I know that most counties and most law enforcement agencies and first responder agencies started training hand in hand, EMS, the fire department, law enforcement. Why? Because we don't need just law enforcement knowing how to enter a building, and we need everyone on board. So I think Tommy's doing a great job with that, and I would like to expand on that as sheriff, and also expand on that training budget. If you start seeing shortfalls or deputies who are not making the cut or getting in trouble, a lot of that reverts back to training. So the more money we can get to better prepare our men and women of the sheriff's office in Pickens County, the better. Thank you.
Thank you.
The manifesto is a very touchy one, and you've got to be careful with that, because the bad thing is, once you put information out, you've got to remember there's other bad guys that want to maybe commit an active shooter. So the last thing we're going to do is give them information on how they can be successful or not successful in that as they're planning. So you got to be real careful with it. There are things put out on these critical incidents, but it's all controlled through law enforcement. Law enforcement decides what is released. There's also an after-action review report that's done on any critical incident, and there's some good information in there that could be released, because that's controlled. That's all handled by all the agencies that responded. They all sit down in a room in a round table, and they discuss what went wrong and what went right. So that's something that you could possibly put out there as far as the information goes. Now, as far as the training goes, you've got to have all three disciplines. And there's a fire guy sitting right back there. My son's a fireman. You've got to have fire. You know, it's not just about law enforcement. Law enforcement's going to go into an active shooter and take out the bad guy. But until that threat is eliminated, that person is shooting innocent people. You have got to train the fire and EMS, have them on your back going in to start treating the victims. You're going to have to bypass, as law enforcement, you've got to bypass that victim, whether it's a child or an adult. You have to bypass that victim laying on the floor to eliminate the threat, because if you stop to help that person, that victim on the floor, the shooter's still actively shooting other victims in that building. So if I clear this building right here, why can't fire and EMS come in right behind me and start treating the folks in this room that have been shot as we're going after the active shooter in the next building? That's where we need to be in this county. It can't be just about law enforcement. We've got to have all three disciplines involved in the training. You've got to do it in different schools. You can't do it in one school. There's 24 schools in the county. You've got to know all the layouts of all the schools.
Thank you.
That's the way to do it.
Mr. James, 2 minutes.
With respect to having all three disciplines involved, that's what Tommy was talking about. The Rescue Task Force involves that. And that is something that we've been doing. It's something that, a matter of fact, the Sheriff's Office, along with all the agencies in this county, just did a training last year on. We did a widespread simulated event with live fire, well, not live fire, but blanks, to simulate what that would be like. Because what we wanted is we wanted our deputies to know what that was like. The other thing that we've done since then, and let's get back to this. First of all, the reason school shootings happen, outside of obviously the individual who's responsible, is for two reasons: poor policies and poor planning. And I'll tell you, this is also a testament to Tommy, because Tommy does an excellent job, particularly in this type of training. We have gone above what you would ever think with respect to how we train for this. Every single time that our school resource officers are off, we have them out at a school doing an active shooter training. The other thing we've done is we've also put long rifles in every school, in every county school in this county. And we've also put gun lockers to secure those guns, so that when our deputy is confronted with a threat, they actually have the firepower to fire back. And then with respect to the manifesto, I think you get into First Amendment issue there. I think I'm with David on this. I think it's up to you as to whether you want to read that smut. But I do think we need to analyze it from a psychology standpoint to figure out what this person is going through, so that we can prevent this from happening again in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Fittner, you have 1 minute if you have anything additional you'd like to add.
I just want to say that Tommy is a very good trainer.
Thank you. Well, I think we have established that you are a good trainer, Mr. Johnson. So we will start with you again. You'll have 3 minutes. Vehicle chases are a big deal regarding safety for not just the drivers on the road, but also pedestrians walking along the streets or in the yards. What would your policy be on high-speed car chases?
That's a great question because it is. It's one of those scenarios where we have to, as law enforcement, make sure that we are protecting you guys, the public, appropriately without ever upsetting the balance of that dichotomy of us becoming the problem. Because it's proven that if vehicle chases go too long, there's a roughly guesstimate, over a 90% chance that it is going to end in some sort of crash, which is likely to involve you or someone in your family. My personal opinion is that pit maneuver is the most acceptable way to end these dangerous chases as fast as possible. Because it's proven that if you can stop that chase within the first 45 seconds, you're going to completely limit the danger to the officer. Right? Because we have more officers killed in automobile accidents than we do from gunfire. You're going to limit the danger to the citizens, to my children who are traveling the very same highways to and from school. You're going to limit the danger to the innocent citizen who's merely trying to get home to their family. So establishing our agency as a PIT certified agency, getting instructors that are capable to teaching that, because as of right now, if an officer purposely engages in striking a vehicle, it is considered deadly force in the state of South Carolina if you are not PIT certified. So that would be my answer to that question is we will become a PIT certified agency with PIT instructors with vehicles that are equipped for that maneuver. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison, 2 minutes.
So when it comes to pursuing criminals who don't want to pull over for us, right now in South Carolina, failure to stop for blue lights, it is a high court misdemeanor. I would push as sheriff, and I know there's several others that would probably hold my hand and do it as well. I would push for it to be a felony. Here's why. Because, as Tommy said, a lot of vehicle pursuits end in crashes. The suspect crashes or the suspect crashes into an innocent bystander. In my administration, what I would see is the use of forcible stops. That's the only way that you can mitigate the risk of any kind of vehicle pursuit. If you just cut your lights off and you go the other way, a lot of times they go down the road, same speed, same driving, they wreck. And we're not even behind them. I've seen it. I've seen it for almost 25 years. I've chased more cars than I can count. It is one of the most dangerous activities that a law enforcement officer can get engaged in is a pursuit. But again, with the forcible stops, whether that be the pit maneuver or just absolutely tearing your patrol car up and putting them in a ditch so that they stop, that is the only way to mitigate the risk. If you have a no chase policy, which a lot of agencies go to, the only people who are going to stop for us are you guys. Are you guys. Anybody in here think that's fair? I don't. I pay insurance too. So we will pursue cars, but we will do it safely. We will have the training, and our vehicles will be set up with the proper bumpers on the front to mitigate these risks and these pursuits. But we are not going to turn our blue lights off and lay down. We're not going to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hubbard, 2 minutes.
The pursuit is dictated by the crime that was committed. If you're chasing a car for a stolen tag, okay, that's about $25 an hour. Somebody stole a tag off your car. Is that worth risking that officer's life and your life or your family's life? Is it worth it really to get him and take him into custody right then? My opinion, no. That's why there's so many restrictions on chasing cars. If you're going to chase a car, it's going to be a felon. It's going to be an armed robbery suspect. It's going to be a murder suspect. It's going to be somebody who's committed a rape or whatever. It's going to be a felon. And I do like the forcible stop. We did it for the 3 years I was in Greenville as a major. Under Hobart, we put forcible stopping in place, and it really worked well. Now, you'll tear up some cars, but we do outfit them with the push bars on the front, and that helps save a lot of damage on cars. So that minimizes the damage that you actually do to the car. So the forcible stopping would be the way to go until you could do the pit maneuvering, but pit takes a long time. You got to have a lot of money. Your insurance alone for pit maneuver is $1 million for your county. What it costs the county for you to even have that in your county. So I know because I worked on it in Greenville, and I was the one trying to put that together before I left. But it's a big policy. It's a big policy you got to pay out. You got to have. But the biggest thing for me is a tag light out, a stolen tag, whatever it's misdemeanor shoplifting. I'm not going to put you, your family, your children, or my deputies at risk for a misdemeanor charge. It is just not worth it. We'll get that guy another day, I promise you. Most of the time when they chasing a guy, they know who they are anyhow. All we got to do is sign a warrant, go pick him up while he's in his best sleep, and do it safely. Keeps you safe, keeps us safe.
Thank you.
To reiterate what Damon said, I think, quite frankly, pursuits are the most dangerous thing that we do in this profession. It's the one time in which we become the liability. And so I think pursuits are dangerous. And I think if we're going to be pursuing for anything that's not a felony, it's not worth it. It is not worth it for us to put the lives of your family, of your children, and of your grandparents at risk. Because I've seen it. I've been a part of it, unfortunately. With respect to pit maneuvers, I'm receptive to the idea of pit maneuvers. I think that it's a valuable tool, but being sheriff, one of the things that you have to balance is capital items. And what we're not talking about in this is the damage to vehicles. Right now, the Pickens County Sheriff's Office runs a fleet of 140 vehicles, and we have about 8 spare cars. And at any given time, one of our deputies can tell you, there's probably about 5 or 6 deputies in spare cars. So we might have 2 or 3 available. So my concern becomes what the cost is to the taxpayer if we delve into that too far, because we're going to destroy cars. But I just really think it's one of the most dangerous things that we do, and under my administration, I think I would adhere to really only situations in which it's a felony, because what I ask our deputies every single time is if you can justify it, knowing that your parents or your grandparents or a car bringing your children is coming in the opposite direction, then by all means pursue. But if not, if you don't feel comfortable with that, turn around. It's too dangerous.
Thank you. Mr. Pickens, 2 minutes, please.
So the way that it worked when I was there is basically you decide to pursue somebody, you turn on your lights. If they pull over, that's good. If they don't, then you say on the radio that you're 10-0. And then what happened when I was there, is you have to continue to give out the conditions. It's raining, or it's dry. There's no one on the road but us. Or there's a lot of people on the road, and now he's passing on a double yellow line. And as people are hearing that on the radio, the supervisor would then have the authority, if he's hearing this, like it's wet, he's passing on a double yellow line, the supervisor could say on the radio, hey, stop it, back it off. And because when you're in the pursuit as an officer, you want to get them so bad, and I just have to. And so you need a level-headed person saying, hey, whoa, I hear that you have to. But what I'm hearing on the radio is dangerous, and you could hurt more people. And so the supervisor calls it off. One thing that I think that I would put in place as a policy is if you are a rookie or within the first year or 2, that's how it's going to be. You're going to say what you're seeing and hearing, and the supervisor is going to be able to tell you to keep going or to stop. If you have been at this a long time and you don't get caught up in your emotions and you can clearly see what's going on. Because that's what happens when you do this job for a while. It quits doing this and it starts to slow down to where you can tell what's going on. And I'll trust those officers to make that decision. But the younger guys, per policy, you're a rookie or maybe 1 year in, you'll have to call it out. We're going to make that decision. And when it comes to stopping them and maybe pitting them and stuff, word gets around. If word gets around we're not stopping them, they're going to take off. If word gets around that we are making it happen and we're putting people in ditches, they're going to knock it off.
Thank you. We are getting close to our time to wrap things up.
Judge, could I have my 1 minute?
I'm sorry.
Yes. So, no problem. So Scott actually gave me a great platform. That's exactly what I was going to say is law enforcement's dangerous. And no knock on librarians, but we didn't sign up to be librarians, so there is risk in our job. If we set a precedence that we're not going to stop cars, then they're not going to stop. If we set a precedence that we're going to forcibly stop you if you run from us, less people will run, because we can't let them all go. Many a crime has been solved. Many a major crime has been solved because a law enforcement officer stopped someone for failing to signal, for speeding, for left of center, for a very minor infraction. So if we set that precedence that if you run from us, even for a minor infraction, we're going to pick you. Now, there's always that balance of the dichotomy is the officer is going to have to do that forcible stop within a certain amount of time, or he will have to let it go outside of a felonious crime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I tried to teach that. We are almost out of time, so I want to ask one more question. If we would, just each of you take a couple of minutes for this, and then we'll have your 2 minute. And Mr. Harrison, we'll start with you. I'm the executive director of the Mike Gallagher Show Charitable Foundation. One of the things we do, and I left each of you a copy of our First Responder Bible. We distribute those to law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs, any first responder around the country who request one free of charge. We've distributed about 60,000 of those Bibles in the past few years, and I'll read some of the emails that we get on requesting those, and there seems to be a real hunger among first responders for something to help them deal with the stress that you guys are under every single day. Take a minute. The suicide rate is high among your profession. Divorce is high among your profession. I read from some of the FBI data between 2016 and 2022, there were 1,287 law enforcement suicides. That's just horrible. Some years there were more suicides than there were in line of duty deaths, which is sad. And unfortunately, too, when you dig a little deeper geographically, northeastern states had 25% of those, the western states 21%, Midwest 20%, but the South had 33% of those suicides. Take a minute and talk about what role faith plays in your life and how it would influence how you serve as sheriff.
So I was actually asked this question about 2 months ago while out meeting the public. But I had a lady ask me about my faith, and then she followed that up with, how have you gotten through all of the things that you have been through in law enforcement and all of the things that you have seen? The answer was simple. I lean on my faith. Now, I'm a more private guy when it comes to my faith and my relationship with the Lord. But I can tell you, I've had more traumatic experiences than most human beings will have in their entire lifetime, and I've done that in 24 and a half years, to the point of seeing my friend killed in the line of duty, something that I will never forget. We have a huge mental health crisis in this country in general. We have that same issue in the first responder community. And you're starting to see agencies now come around to actually providing assistance to folks who need help. Whether you were in a shooting, you went to an infant fatality, a bad wreck that you responded to, whatever the case may be, those are traumatic events that we never forget as first responders. And I want to further that. Obviously, in Pickens County, if I become sheriff, that is something that I will be very passionate about, because I've been through the process. Now, the old days, when you would get into something or see something traumatic, they would call a chaplain, and no offense to chaplains at all, but they would come out and speak to you roadside, pray with you, and slap you on the back, and they'd say, we're going to pray for you. And that's great, but that don't get it done. We need to talk, and as type A personality folks who work in the first responder community, we don't like to talk. When we come home, we don't like to talk about our day. We don't like to relive the things that we see. But the answer is that we have to talk about it. That's the only way to get it out. But going back to the faith, I've got the miniature version in my patrol car, and I've had it for years. That is a good thing for us. That is a good thing for the public. And I appreciate the gift tonight.
You're quite welcome. Thank you. Mr. Hoover, 2 minutes.
My second week solo as a deputy sheriff back in '93, I got a call of a dispatcher gave it out. A young 12-year-old boy was talking to a 13-year-old girl on the phone. And the only thing she said to him when she called him was, "Thank you for being my friends over the year." And he thought he heard a gunshot, and she didn't talk anymore. So I went out in my young career, 2 weeks into it, and get there, it's a duplex. And I knocked on the door, tried to look in the blinds. All the blinds are closed. There's lights on. No car in the driveway. Thank goodness I had enough sense to call a maintenance man out to come out and open that door for me so I could go in and check further. When I walked in, I was horrified at what I saw in front of me. This 13-year-old girl had written a 10-page suicide note, and she put a 357 in her mouth. I didn't sleep for about almost 2 weeks. And I reached out to my pastor, Dr. John Adams, of Easley First Baptist. I'm going to tell you something. John Adams saved my life. I called him one afternoon. I was working that day. I called him and I said, "I really need to talk to you today if I can meet with you." He stayed at that church until I got off work that night. When I got off duty, I went and met with him, and we talked for about 3 to 4 hours. And I don't think I would be sitting here in front of you guys right now if it wasn't for Dr. John Adams talking me through it. So I'm very passionate about taking care of the men and women that would be working under my command if I was a sheriff. I can promise you that those folks are going to get the mental health counseling that they need, because it's not just about folks out here that are on drugs and alcohol and everything else. It's about the men and women who serve in any kind of first responder service, fire, EMS, or law enforcement. All those guys go through traumatic events almost daily. And if you don't have a way to vent that, and you don't have a person or somewhere you go that feel comfortable to relieve that, then the suicide rate is going to continue, and unfortunately continue to go up, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. James, 2 minutes.
Mental health is a serious issue in our profession, really no different than the military. We're exposed to the absolute worst that society has to offer. And as Damon was just speaking, I thought back to probably one of the most traumatic events that I ever had in my career, which occurred in this very community on Cherokee Trail on May 14th, 2013, when a mother shot her husband and shot her 2 kids. Her husband only lived, but her 2 unfortunately perished. And I'll be honest with you, I struggled with that. I struggled with that like no other. It's something that to this day I can close my eyes, and the image inside that home is burned into my memory forever. And quite frankly, I'm getting a little choked up talking about it, because it's something that is, I don't know that I've ever fully processed. And as David said, we work in a profession where it's type A risk takers. And we surround ourselves by people who basically pat us on the back and tell us to suck it up. That's not, I will say, historically anymore. We're starting to now, I think, trend in the right direction with respect to mental health and law enforcement. We are focusing on having debriefings to discuss it. But, you know, I frequently think back to that event and think back, I really wish I had a debriefing. To go to my faith actually comes into that event too. I am not the most outspoken one about my faith, because I think my faith is personal. I'm not going to politicize my faith. It's something that is to myself, but I have a conversation with God every day. And I beg him to look after our deputies. But I also, in that situation, in that home, that day, got on my knees and begged God to explain to me why this happened. And fortunately, he's brought me out on the other side.
Thank you, sir. This will take a few minutes.
So the separation is tough for me because I have been a pastor before, and so anytime I've dealt with a situation where I felt like me being a police officer wasn't helpful anymore, I take my badge off and I just say, and I've done this multiple times, I'll take it off and I set it to the side and I say, you're talking to Michael, so what's going on? And because the badge sometimes will make people feel uncomfortable or make them feel like you're recording it and writing down everything that they... But I've had to do that before, take the badge off, because you just feel in the moment, this is bigger than what I'm doing here, and you just click that baby off and set it to the side and say, what's really going on? But what I would do for Pickens County as sheriff is what is done at Oconee County, and I think it's amazing. Oconee County has a team that they have put together of fellow officers, so you're not talking to somebody who's never done the job, but these fellow officers have gone to training on how to counsel other officers, and they've all been through that training. If you go through a traumatic event, which we all went through in Oconee County in November, and in the other day when that poor child was burnt, you have to go. If you were part of that group, you have to go talk to that set of officers, and they're not going to do anything other than just listen to you, hear what's going on, and they're going to give you recommendations, try to help you out. If they feel like it is excessive, like if they feel like your grief is very high or that you wouldn't be effective, then that group can give you time off. Like, you're not going to get time off and not get paid. You can have some time off and to get yourself together. And so that's something I think would be wonderful to implement, is send some officers to training and that be the group that you talk to after your traumatic event.
Thank you. Mr. Blankenship.
Joey, what a terrific question. You know, I've always said, if you don't want to hear me talk about God, do not put a microphone in my hand. So, my faith it doesn't play a role in who I will be as sheriff. It is who I am. It is my number one goal, is to serve my God. When Christ walked this earth, he was asked what the two greatest commandments were. And he said, first is to love your Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul. And second unto that is to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And that's who I am as a deputy. And that is who I will be as your sheriff. I will first and foremost always serve my God first. And then secondly to that, I will serve you because I love you like I love myself. The deputies that are in this room will tell you I love them beyond measure. That the reason I train so hard is because if that day ever comes, I want it to be me and not them. And my experience and my relationship with my God is anything but private, because I have two goals. And the first one has been met. I have that sacred relationship with my Jesus Christ. And my second one is to take as many of you guys with me as I can. So it will never be private. My faith will never be private. And I will sing his glory to the rooftops. When it comes to mental health, I've already been in contact with Upstate Warrior Solutions. I have a good friend named Darius Hall that works there. He has reached out to me and said, we have so many assets that you guys can utilize. My goal is to put together a peer support group that is mandatory for an officer anytime that they're engaged in any kind of critical event. Because guys like me won't talk about it unless you make them. And you'll have to make them, and you'll have to make them, and you'll have to make them. And maybe the 10th time you make them sit in a room and say, hey man, what's getting to you? They'll finally open up, because we internalize that stuff so much. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, sir. So we'll wrap things up, gentlemen. You have 2 minutes each to cover whatever you'd like to cover as we finish tonight.
First thing I want to talk about is the active shooter training. I'm very passionate about that. Listen, we have 16,500 some odd students county. We've got about 24, 25 schools in this county. We do have SROs in most of the schools, not all the schools in this county. That is a good thing. But Chuck mentioned that they did train with all disciplines a year ago. Other than that, it was 9 years ago. So in the last 9 years, we've had active shooter training with all disciplines twice. That is not enough. Now, I like Chuck, and I like Tommy, I like all these guys. But this is where we need to really get serious about the conversation. We are not protecting our kids in our schools. We're not protecting you going out to Walmart and shopping and somebody starting to shoot fire off rounds inside of Walmart, or even in your church. If we don't train together and we don't do it on a regular basis, I'm talking about 2, 3, 4 times a year with all first responders, I'm talking about EMS, fire, and law enforcement. You have to train together to be proficient together. The more you train together, the more you know what each other's job is to do. And get fire and EMS to the victims as quick as you can is the best thing you can do to help these victims that have been shot in this active shooter event. I know we don't want to think about these things. We're going to hope and hope things don't happen. We can't keep going on hope because we see it going on all over the country. There was a guy in Australia the other day that went through a mall. I don't know if you guys saw it or not, but he stabbed like several people. I think 6 or 7 of them died with a knife. So it's happening all around us. I just think that we need to do more here to be prepared to respond for it. I'd rather over-prepare and nothing ever happen than under-prepare and something happen.
Thank you, sir. Mr. James.
Damon's not wrong about the incident prior to last year. However, I was not the chief deputy then, and Tommy was not in training at that point. But since that time, I would say this has been a collaborative effort. But really what I'd like to talk about is, and we didn't really get into it this evening, what's one of the fundamental roles of law enforcement? It's crime suppression. We didn't have a conversation about crime suppression. We didn't have a conversation about the direction of crime in this county. I will tell you, I think that this race is so important for that reason as well. And tonight you guys have had an opportunity to hear us and hear our stances on a variety of things, but we never talked about a plan as to how we're going to suppress crime. And that's what affects all of you. And I'll tell you, as chief deputy of the Pickens County Sheriff's Office, I've overseen the second largest reduction in property crime in the state of South Carolina. I've overseen Pickens County being the 14th most populous county in the state of South Carolina, now having the 3rd lowest violent crime rate in the state. When you compare us to our neighbors, we are the lowest in 13 of the 19 statistical categories that SLED monitors. And I think that's important, and that's a conversation we need to have. Because the reality is the next sheriff of Pickens County needs to be somebody with experience, somebody with a proven history of pushing forth initiatives, spearheading initiatives that reduce crime in our community. The next sheriff of Pickens County needs to be somebody with executive management experience. It needs to be somebody with budget experience, somebody with a strategic plan for the future. Far too often in this state, we have seen the consequences. Look at Will Lewis at Granville County, of somebody learning on the fly. Pickens County is better than that. So, I'll tell you, I'm running for sheriff because I have delivered tangible results, and I believe I can continue to deliver tangible results. And if elected your sheriff, I will do everything in my power to make Pickens County a model for policing and public safety in South Carolina.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Pickens.
So one of the things that I think is important, and one of the things that's going to be very high on my list, is to protect the reputation of the Sheriff's Department. A lot of times, and one of the issues that I have had come past my ear, something I've noticed even myself in this profession a long time, is we have officers that are married sleeping with other people's married spouse. And if I'm the sheriff, that's gonna stop. And we're just gonna let it go. People have said, well, do you think you're the moral police? But here, listen to me. I just want you to hear this. An officer has a badge a gun, he has the authority to take your freedom and potentially the authority to take your life. I think anyone with that level of authority needs to be morally good. And if they're not, if you've got all that authority, I don't want that authority in the hands of somebody who has weak morals. I want that to be a good person. And so I'm going to hold us to a good moral standard. Not perfect, but gosh, don't be sleeping with somebody else's husband or wife. And everybody knows, and everybody's like, oh, no one knows. We didn't tell nobody. Everybody knows, and it will stop. And the last thing is, if you think I should be sheriff, you probably noticed there are no signs with my name on them. This is a word-of-mouth campaign. I'm spending my own money, and the reason for that is a sheriff campaign can cost a lot of money. And I think if you're taking in close to $50,000, sometimes up to $80,000, if you're taking in donations, someone on that list is going to feel like you owe them a favor. I donated to your campaign. Well, there will be no one that says that to me. There will just be the citizens of Pickens County as a whole and the law. That's what will direct me. That's what will push me. And so if you don't see my signs, it doesn't mean I ain't winning. Just
So I'm running for sheriff because I've worked there for 19 years, and I want to be the leader that I've always wanted. The leader that leads from the front, the leader that cares about his men and women, the leader that sets a culture which holds a standard. See, it doesn't matter what business you're in, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's sales, manufacturing. If you don't have good culture, you will never be successful. And I've shared before, and I'll share again tonight, I have 3 things that I plan to do to positively affect the culture of not only our agency, but the lives of our officers and our communities as a whole. Because the sheriff, yes, he runs the sheriff's office, but he is an integral figure in our community. He's someone that I want you to look up to. He's someone I want you to know that you can lean on in your time of need. And when you have difficulties, that you can call him. And I will come to your house. Fair morning, make coffee. I love it. We'll have a cup of coffee. But it's the ABCs of the culture change, and it's accountability, building relationships, and community outreach that I want to do. When we talk about the things that Scott mentioned, there are many other vices that can cause the downfall of an officer. So I included in 3 things: anything an officer does that is illegal, immoral, or unethical, are automatic expulsion from my agency. Period. No questions asked. If you make a mistake while trying to do the right thing, we can work through those. Having that accountability for the officers, for myself, and other entities that serve you. I want to build the relationships with our local municipalities because we're all on the same team. We all need to have the same dream. And lastly is that community outreach. Community outreach is not something that's new to me because of a campaign. I have been in the community serving schools and serving youth-oriented organizations since I began my career.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. So I'm running for sheriff here in Pickens County as a citizen of Pickens County. The only candidate on this stage who was born and raised here. I saw missed opportunities years ago. I don't think that I'm better than anyone else, but I know that I can do things differently. The biggest thing for me is hold people accountable. Change the culture. I am very proactive. I've always been proactive. You can ask any officer in the entire upstate if I'm proactive, and they will tell you. It's not a secret. I've been accused of being a tough talker. I consider that a compliment because I can back it up. If you guys haven't noticed, and I don't know if this is the first debate you guys have attended, but I don't talk down to you guys. I don't talk over you guys. Why? Because I'm just like you. I come from a hard-working, blue-collar family who worked in manufacturing plants or the cotton mill. I'm the only one who has stepped out to do something different than working a plant and actually go into law enforcement because I feel like I have a servant's heart. The thing that I'm going to bring different is that I will know the guys and the girls' names when I pass them in the hallway. I will know how many children they have. I will know which church they go to. I will know what their hobbies are and when their parents have health problems or they fall on hard times. Because I'm a very personable guy, even though I don't appear to be sometimes. I'm a very personable guy, and I care about a lot of people. Right now in Greenville County, we have roll call every day but Sunday. That means every day we go to work early, we all go in the room, and we have roll call. I pray us out. I'm the one the lieutenant calls on to pray us out. And then I jump up and go to the door and open the door, and I slap every deputy on the back as hard as I can, because I want them to be alert, awake, and ready to go to work, because I care about their safety.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all again for being here. I'm going to turn it back over to BJ in just a moment, but you've got some tough choices here. The main thing is show up and vote in June. That's the important thing. And let's give them another big round of applause.
I'll tell you what, after that, it just made our decision tougher, I think. If you feel like I do, I would love to have a slate of all you guys up there. You guys are great. But I want to say thank you very much for everyone coming out. Thank you guys for attending this debate. Thank you for running and taking your time out of your lives to put forth this effort for our county. I also want to thank the Batesville Community Center for opening up their doors, their lights, their air. I really, really appreciate that. Let's give them a round of applause. This is wonderful. And is Greg White in the room? Is he in the room? There he is. He's right there. I didn't see him. Okay. Something I didn't discuss earlier, but I do have Mr. Greg White standing in the back of the room. He has a bag. Batesville Community Center opened up their doors for us free of charge for all of us. So if you don't mind, if you have something that you can donate to the Batesville Community Center, we would greatly appreciate it, and I know they would too. And thank you again for opening your doors. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for sharing. God bless.